Welcome to this explainer. I am so glad you're here today because we're going on a seriously fascinating zoom-out journey. We're going to start at the absolute microscopic level, looking at the tiny invisible atoms that make up our bodies, and we'll steadily zoom all the way out to understand the massive global standards used in life-saving medical diagnostics worldwide. It's basically a journey from the infinitely small to the globally crucial, all focused on how we understand the actual machinery of life.
Here is a quick roadmap for our explainer today. We'll hit 5 key areas. 1. The building blocks of life. 2. Measuring molecules and moles. 3. Ions and electrolytes. 4. The power of isotopes. And finally, 5. Global measurement standards.
All right, let's dive into part 1, building blocks of life, the microscopic foundation of everything. To really wrap our heads around this, it helps to think of the universe and our bodies kind of like a giant box of Lego pieces. In this analogy, biochemistry is essentially the ultimate instruction manual for how those pieces build living cells and how they actually operate day in and day out. This isn't just some abstract concept, It's the science of the chemical constituents of living cells. Understanding this science is how we understand life itself. It's absolutely crucial because it's the key that allows medical professionals to diagnose and treat really complex molecular diseases, from diabetes all the way to cystic fibrosis and sickle cell anemia. So our most basic Lego block is the element, like carbon, for example. An element is a substance made of only one kind of atom. It's the foundational piece that just cannot be broken down any further by chemical reactions. Whether it's the carbon in your DNA or the oxygen we breathe, elements are the pure, unsplittable starting materials of everything. Now, if an element is the basic Lego block itself, the atom is the microscopic plastic that actually forms it. It's literally the smallest particle of an element that can still take part in a chemical reaction. And every single atom has 2 defining traits. First, its atomic number, usually represented by the letter Z, which tells us the exact number of protons. And second, its atomic weight, represented by the letter A, which counts all of the nucleons. That just means all the protons and the neutrons packed together right in the center. To picture this, take a look at the fairly complex carbon atom. It's got its 6 protons and an atomic weight of 12. Now compare that to the incredibly simple hydrogen atom, which has an atomic number of 1 and an atomic weight of just 1. It is pretty amazing to think that these tiny, tiny variations in protons and neutrons create entirely different substances. Okay, now that we have atoms, we can start snapping them together. When we do this, we form molecules and compounds. These are the larger structures you absolutely need for creating complex biomolecules. Things like the carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins that keep living cells alive and functioning. Now, there is a slight difference here. A molecule is the smallest particle that possesses all the properties of that element or compound, but a compound specifically requires 2 or more totally different kinds of atoms joined together. The visual difference here is actually really striking. If you snap 2 identical oxygen atoms together, you get an oxygen molecule. But if you snap different atoms together, say 2 hydrogens and 1 oxygen, you get a totally different life-saving compound, water. Moving right along to section 2, measuring molecules and moles, making the invisible quantifiable. We know these building blocks exist, but how on earth do scientists actually measure things this tiny in the real world? Well, the secret is literally just simple addition. By adding up the atomic weights of all the individual atoms in a molecule, we get its molecular weight. Let's look at sodium. It has a weight of 23. Chlorine is 35.5. So if we snap them together to make NaCl, which is just table salt, we add them up and get a molecular weight of 58.5. For a larger biomolecule like glucose, you add up all those atoms and you get a molecular weight of 180. And right here is where we bridge the gap into the physical world. When we take that microscopic molecular weight and express it in physical grams that you can actually hold in your hand, we call it a mole. So 1 mole of glucose is exactly 180 grams. This concept is a huge deal when measuring what we call osmoles. It helps doctors figure out exactly how highly active substances like sodium or glucose exert physical osmotic pressure in the water inside our blood and cells. Next up, section 3, ions and electrolytes, the spark of life. So we have our structural building blocks, and we know how to weigh them. But let's see what happens when these particles get zapped with an electrical charge. You see, atoms don't always stay perfectly balanced. A neutral atom becomes an electrically charged ion just by shifting its electrons around.
If it loses a negatively charged electron, it leaves behind a positive cation. But if it gains an electron, it creates a negative anion. And why does this matter so much? Well, these charged ions actually become the vital electrolytes in our blood. Inside a solution, just like in a physical battery, positive cations, like sodium, move toward the negative cathode, while negative anions, like chloride, move toward the positive anode. This exact electrical movement is literally what powers your nervous system and keeps your heart beating. Pretty wild, right?
Which brings us to Section 4, the power of isotopes, heavy variance, and radiation. Now, some atoms have a bit of an identity crisis. They belong to the exact same elements, meaning they carry the exact same number of protons, but they carry extra heavy neutrons. We call these isotopes. Now, stable isotopes are completely harmless. Their nuclei are totally stable. But unstable isotopes have a neutron-to-proton ratio of more than 1. Because of that, they're constantly trying to stabilize themselves, and in doing so, they spontaneously decay, emitting ionizing radiation. I know the word radiation sounds incredibly dangerous, but human ingenuity has actually turned these unstable isotopes into absolutely incredible medical tools. They're used all over the world diagnostically. For example, doctors use iodine-131 for thyroid disorders or cobalt-60 for scanning brain tumors. They are even used therapeutically to aggressively treat certain cancers, like breast carcinoma. It's just amazing how we've managed to harness this power safely. But we absolutely have to talk about the flip side. We cannot ignore these severe, life-threatening hazards that come with spontaneous radioactive decay if it isn't strictly controlled. The dangers of radiation exposure are very, very real. They range from immediate medical emergencies like bone marrow depression and immune suppression, all the way to devastating delayed effects like cataracts and cancerogenesis, and even severe long-term genetic consequences like irreversible DNA damage and mutations. Finally, let's zoom out to Section 5, Global Measurement Standards, speaking the same scientific language. Okay, we've covered microscopic elements, complex chemistry, and really intense medical treatments. But how do doctors and scientists worldwide communicate these highly sensitive measurements without making deadly translation errors? Well, for a long time, traditional measurement systems actually caused immense global confusion. To fix this, the World Health Organization officially adopted standardized SI units back in 1979. This standardized everything. It provided base units like moles and derived units like millimoles per liter, ensuring that a lab in Tokyo speaks the exact same chemical language as a hospital in Toronto. Sometimes, though, you still have to translate older, traditional units into this modern SI language. Thankfully, we can break down the seemingly difficult math of converting traditional milligrams per deciliter into standardized millimoles per liter into two super simple logical steps. First, just find your conversion factor by dividing the molecular weight by 10. Second, divide your traditional lab value by that new factor. That's it. Let's walk through a real-world example, like a standard blood glucose reading of 100 milligrams per deciliter. Step 1, we already know glucose has a molecular weight of 180. We divide that by 10 and our conversion factor is 18. Step 2, take that lab value of 100, divide it by our factor of 18, and boom, we get 5.56 millimoles per liter. And just like that, you're speaking the international language of biochemistry. To wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a little challenge. As we've seen, if a doctor miscalculates, a translation error could literally be deadly. So, knowing that urea has a molecular weight of 60, how would you convert a traditional reading of 120 milligrams per deciliter into its proper, standardized SI unit to make sure a patient gets the exact right care? Think about it. Thank you so much for zooming out with me today, going from the tiniest atom all the way up to the global systems that keep us healthy. Stay curious, keep learning, and I'll see you in the next explainer.